based on some community input. Then CFO Cooper is going to talk a bit about elementary boundaries and the introduction of that piece. That's what we're going to focus on tonight, our elementary school boundaries. After that, you're going to go into breakout rooms for probably 20, 25 minutes, maybe a little bit more. We'll see. And you're going to talk about reviewing that new springboard and discussing any issues that come up in your groups. We're going to come back out. We're going to report out our table captains who were solidified last week. 2 weeks ago, rather. Thank you so much for that. You will be the spokespeople for your groups. And we'll also answer any additional clarifying questions. We'll then see if there's any motions, if anyone feels like they need to make any motions, or if we need to answer any more questions. We'll see where we are time-wise. We may need to go back into breakout groups. We may not, depending on the time. We'll go over what we're thinking for agenda for the next meeting, and then we'll wrap it up as promptly at 8 p.m. as we can. That's what we have for right now. What I'd like to do is I would like to now, I'm going to test my Zoom skills here. I'd like to share a screen here. Jake, do we see that? The Issaquah School District website?
That is a hard no, Dr. Elmy. Oh,
now
no.
Let me know if you do.
It's coming. There you go.
All right. So just to review, all of our documentation, if you don't see it come through the email through the weeks, you see my cursor right here. I'm going to go right to Boundary Review 2021. I'm going to click on that. Okay. Charter, roster. December 3rd, there's the agenda. There's the mini summary, the unofficial meeting minutes. Click on that. Scroll down, and then you can see all of the minutes. What we'd like to do right now, if you've taken a peek at these, that's great. If not, if you could take a peek at the minutes, let's take about 3 minutes, and then we will come back and see if there's anything that we may need to tweak on those minutes, and then we'll see if there might be a motion to approve those minutes. I'm going to hand the ball at that point in 3 minutes over to CFO Cooper, and he can do his Robert's Rules thing on that. So just take about 3 minutes. Take a look at those on your own screen or on mine, the meeting minutes from our boundary review 2 weeks ago. Okay. Mr. Cooper, take it from here.
So now that you've all had a time to look at the minutes, could I entertain a motion on the minutes? Don't everybody be bashful. Don't everybody jump in.
I move to approve the minutes.
So we have a motion from Daryl Hardkey. Is there a second?
A second.
So moved. Okay. Any more further discussion? Usually not on the minutes. Anybody find anything that concerning them? I should say that I've had them amended before. Okay. So it looks like the voting has already started. The poll is up. So all those in favor of the minutes as presented, please indicate in the poll.
All right.
All right. Apparently we have some non-voting committee members voting, but that's okay. 43 accepted. So we know that we've, I see my transportation folks are laughing. I assume that you voted yes on the minutes. Appreciate that, team. Thank you for your eager participation. Remember, you're not, we explained to the committee you're non-voting members, but hey, it appears for the record that the motion carries unanimously and the minutes have been passed.
Okay. I think now we are at a place where, thank you, Stephen. We are now at a place where we are going to move on in our agenda, and we are going to be taking questions from the committee on either A, community correspondence that came in over the past 2 weeks, and or B, questions from the Springboard from last meeting and changes driven by stakeholder input. Jake, I don't know if you want to give a bit of a precursor before we jump into the questions. And folks, if you have a question, I think do one of two things. Either raise your hand virtually or put it in the chat, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So there's two different ways you could ask a question. You can ask it yourself. Raise your hand virtually. Let's do it that way. Or put it in the chat, and I'll monitor that. So as you are thinking about questions that you might have, I know that Jake wanted to go over a few things about the tweaks that were made to the Springboard over the past 2 weeks. Jake, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Almy. So can you see that screen there?
Yep.
So in this new virtual environment, it dawned on me that we may have to do things a little differently, obviously. So normally when we get community input, I would, in a group setting in person, we would kind of synthesize together and then move forward with some potential solutions. So in this case, given the remote environment and the breakout rooms, what I was tasked with, and those of you who hopefully read the robust correspondence, I think we were a couple hundred pages deep in correspondence. And when some themes started to come forward, as you saw in my email to you, I set the technical team out and said, okay, this is why there's not any hubris or perfect way to do a Springboard. It's a starting point for a conversation. So what I did for you, along with the technical team's expertise, is we tried to, in the document, and there is not a revision officially to the Springboard, as you noted, until you all take action. So the Springboard is in effect from last meeting until action is taken by this group. However, there was some consistent messages coming through the community correspondence, and you can, I won't read them, but verbatim, but just for the YouTube fans out there, apparently we have some views on YouTube. In the committee, one of the concerns was the proposed split of Sunset. And so you'll notice that we put forward to you a solution to that potential issue. The elementary 16, there was a feeder there that was split. That's now 100% clean with no division. We had some significant correspondence from Audubon Park neighborhood adjacent to Discovery Elementary. So we were able to make that neighborhood remain at Discovery. And of course, in return, we moved a portion of Creekside's current boundary to elementary 17 in the revised proposal. there was a question and some concern about the Black Nugget piece on number 38. So that was resolved in the revised materials. And then after we did that, we had to recalculate some splits because I had an error in the Issaquah Valley split to start with. And then you can see the remaining splits. And I wanted to find splits because Colleen and I were talking, who's my transportation director, about what a split is. And what a split is the percentage of your fifth graders that are going to feed in to a middle school, right? So if there's an 80-20 split, 80% would be going to middle school A and 20% to middle school B. So I guess what is before you is kind of a springboard of the springboard in hopes to answering some of those community concerns that were coming forward, and give you a place to start as you go into your breakout rooms. And so that I've kind of framed up for you. And now I'll open it up for some questions before we set you out on your task and making hopefully some motions on the springboard this evening. So if anybody would like to share some of the community input you received over the time period, obviously a lot of the written communication you've seen, or other themes you're hearing in the community. So, Dr. Almy, if you want to facilitate through that.
Yep, I think we do have our first question. Lisa Reeder. Lisa, take it on mute and take it away.
Hey guys, thank you so much. So I am representing Discovery Elementary. So our school had a lot of vocal opinions, most of which were solved with keeping Piece 54 at Discovery. So thank you for looking at that. Two things I'm hoping you can address based on a ton of feedback we're still getting is, one, I'm not sure what to tell people why they're not allowed to be on the Zoom meeting. So if you can address that, that would be excellent. Because I've had many people inquire why they can't be. And then two, before we vote on the springboard, I think we need to see the Discovery 80-20% split for the middle school, because I did not see a revised map showing how that split goes.
Okay. And so I do want to address the why can't I be in the Zoom meeting and only can watch. So this is a meeting before the public, not a public meeting. So our board of directors is governed by the Open Public Meetings Act, and when they meet, they have to have it open to the public, and they debate and discuss issues out in the open. We are doing this out in the open as well, but this is a dedicated chartered work group. And for transparency purposes, we, just as we would do in brick and mortar, we would normally in a committee, we would have folks sitting in the back and observe. Our common practice is to allow for public to observe your work, but not interrupt it, not grab a microphone and take over a meeting, not provide presentation. So, you are the stakeholder, you are the feedback loop to your stakeholder group, kind of a representative democracy situation. Again, I don't get a walk on the congressional floor because I'm a citizen of the United States. And so it's akin to that. You have work to do. If a community member, we had requests to provide presentations to this committee, which I said no to, because again, we are a work group. We are not, we're not a public body, and we are being transparent and allowing people to watch our work both on the web and on our website and YouTube. So that is one reason, is that this is a work group. We have a specific charter and goal, and that's why we solicited applications. And so that really is how we are able to complete our work, because if meetings are taken over by an open mic session, I have found that oftentimes we will not get to the salient parts of charter. So it is nothing personal. It is one way that we manage our your work in particular and ours. And so hopefully that people understand that they can view the Zoom, and even if they were actually in the call, we would not have them participate because they're not charter members of the committee. So I know that sounds kind of harsh and bureaucratic, but it is one way we have actually found to get work done in these groups, and that is to control the actual meeting itself. So.
And as far as the 80-20 split at Discovery, Jake, maybe you can make a note that when you go through your elementary boundary introduction, you could cover that piece there.
Yeah, and transportation team, Colleen and Bridget, if you're listening, it would be nice if you have a map prepped. You can I don't know if that went out in the last package or not, since there was so much information. If not, we'll be able to try, hopefully screen share it later.
Okay. Next question, Kelly Butterworth. Kelly, take it away.
Thanks. So I'm representing Sunset, and I will say there was definitely a lot of feedback that we got through putting the message out of what the proposal was. And so I think the community would be really, really happy to see that there is this proposal to keep Sunset together, particularly with having a year of not being able to see anyone and just being able to sort of keep that community. There have been a couple other sort of like questions that came up. And so, I don't know if these are too in the weeds for this, but it was a little bit about why Sunset still would like go to Issaquah Middle School versus the new middle school, since that is closer. And then additionally, the why like Cougar Ridge and Sunset was never an option to like put those two schools together, because they are really like neighboring schools. In that, you have Sunset sort of way over on this far west side, and the kids from Clark and Issaquah Valley are sort of like, you take this big leap over quite a few neighborhoods to get to that area, whereas you've got like this more of a general alignment with like Cougar Ridge. So I think there was just some concern about that, and like thinking of that it's still sort of this spread out or separated community, chopped up community.
Right, and
So,
just for everybody's sake, I can answer a little bit off the cuff on that. There's a lot of history on that Cougar Sunset boundary, nearly 20 years old now, but people still remember when that was redone. And Dr. Almy and I were hired right after that, and apparently that memory is still here. What is interesting, though, is
our old neighbors told us about it, that it was like so controversial. Yeah.
It was, and then several boundaries since then. I've had consternation about Sunset kids going up to Cougar Ridge or vice versa. So often what I've seen in my career is once somebody's in a building, they like to stay, as you can see by a lot of your input. One reason I will tell you that Sunset you would think would be a viable feeder to middle school 6. It would be if we weren't bringing kids from Maywood towards middle school 6. So if we didn't have to alleviate crowding at Maywood and, take 300 kids out of Maywood, then Sunset would be a viable feeder.
Okay.
But in this case, it's not, because we have to alleviate the crowding at Maywood. So those are two answers I can give you off the cuff.
Okay, I think that's a helpful clarity on what's the driver, because it seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense, but knowing that's sort of the piece that you have to pull from a school quite a bit more overcrowded that's further away, I guess.
And I did want to let the committee know I failed miserably at a couple things last meeting. I did not tell the Grand Ridge community that the proposal brings their kindergartners back. I must have slipped my mind. So I wanted to let you know, Principal Ravenscraft emailed me today and said, can you confirm or deny that the proposal brings the Grand Ridge K back? So I did want the community to know that the Grand Ridge K in this proposal would be returning to their home elementary. And then secondarily, the feeder pattern, which was meant to be a visual aid, caused more consternation than clarity. And I apologize for that. I didn't want people to know that, again, we are not talking about high school boundaries. So wherever your kids go to high school now, it is not going to be changed. And that was voiced, as you saw, from some of the Newcastle community, as they thought they were going to feed into Issaquah High School. I want to be clear, we're not changing their feeder pattern. Newcastle is still going to feed back into Liberty High School. Those two things I failed miserably at, and apologize for not being clear enough on that. So.
All right, Megan, I saw Funes. I saw that your hand was up, but in the Jake's last piece, did your question get answered?
It was the Grand Ridge piece. So thank you, Jake.
No problem. Question from Joe Ellen. Are you able to tell us the middle school splits? What high schools those students will then go to? Like if the Discovery students are split 80% to Pine Lake and 20% to Beaver Lake, what happens to those students for high school? Same with the other ones. And Jake, I know that you had put together a high school feeder sheet as well that's on the website. I don't know if that would answer that question.
Well, what I can tell, no, I have not looked at since we are not changing high school boundaries with this committee, wherever their current boundaried high school is, it will be their division. So I have not done the math on the split. So right now, I think the only split middle school feeder we have is at is it Beaver or Pine Lake? Colleen, do you know what? I can't remember if we have any split middle school feeders now.
Well, I believe, Jake, that the only split that we would have from a middle school perspective would probably be middle school 6. Both Beaver Lake and Pine Lake are 100% direct feeders into Skyline right now.
Clean feeders. Okay. So yeah, I do not have that, and that will be germane and pertinent to the high school boundaries. I know everybody wants to get the high school boundaries, but we're not quite there yet. So
I wasn't really worried about the high school boundaries. I was just trying to figure out like if those kids were split apart for middle school, but then getting back together for high school was kind of what I was.
Yeah, that would be what is happening with the Newcastle kiddos. The Newcastle kiddos that go to middle school 6 are going to go back to Liberty because we are currently not changing that high school boundary.
Okay, Marcel Waldman.
Hi. So I have 2 things. The first question that I have pertains to the meetings that were, I think, like a year ago with Jake about the number of students that were in Tallis that would be going to the new middle school. And many people have written me and said they recalled the number was around 80 students. So has Tallis really grown that much since then? Is that why these numbers are quite high or much higher?
Let me look.
So right now it has the Tallis number at like 100. Well, the elementary count is 173. The middle school count is 103, a total of 276.
So the number I would have given you a year ago would have been the middle school and IMS number out of Tallis. So
okay.
Between 80 and 103, 20 kids in over 3 grade levels. That is a reasonable fluctuation.
Okay, so the number was the middle school number,
Correct.
is what you're saying. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
You bet.
And then my second question, I did email in to you, and I know it probably takes a little bit of conversation and juggling, but a lot of the feedback that I have been given thus far, anecdotally, but also I've asked people to send it in, and it didn't look like many did, but mostly about pulling some more students from IVE into the new middle school, which you alluded to that being a little bit difficult because the space isn't so grand. However, picking maybe the base of Squawk Mountain, maybe just to get some more students that are from IVE. So I just wanted to revisit that.
So, so part of it, and I want everybody to know, I can't, sometimes there's been individual emails and I've been really trying hard to CC the boundary box. But I had the team, Colleen and Bridget, actually look at that, Marcel, as soon as you gave me that assignment. I'm very diligent, at least for another few days until break, and then I will be not diligent at all. So I think what we found out, first off, middle school 6 we talked about is site constrained, no extra room for portables. So I am being fairly conservative because I don't want to put kids in there. And my worst fear for parents and principals is I screw up on the numbers and it makes your class sizes big only because we don't have the room for the kiddos, not because of any other reason. So, that I always look at that as, a failure on our part. Not that it doesn't happen, but for the most part, we're trying to be fairly conservative and grab mature neighborhoods. And Tallis does still have some building happening on the very top of the hill, as you know. And then I think Colleen and Bridget Anderson, would you mind talking about, we looked at the kind of the foot of Squawk and what did we come up with? We had that conversation this morning, but I've had many conversations since then. So
Yes, we looked at the base of Squawk and part of downtown that runs along 900 area. And there was about, how many kids were there?
There was 67
67 students in that area. And then it would cut off halfway up. So you just have to Squawk Mountain going to Issaquah Valley.
And what that did in result, Marcel, now it's coming back to me, is that IMS is actually built bigger than middle school 6 and has portable capacity. So if we take more IVE kids, I always like a perfect split, don't get me wrong, if I have to have one, then it inflates middle school 6's numbers and lowers IMS's.
Right.
So that in capacity was working the wrong direction for us. So if you do get the question, part of it is basically building capacity and just in mathematical, and it's also something that we did chase down, but it does lower than IMS's enrollment greater than we would like it to be, given that it's already built and has capacity for additional portable classrooms as needed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing the work on that. I appreciate it.
You bet. It was a good question.
All right, Jake, we've got about 3 more in the chat and 1 more hand up. So let's jump to the chat. A question I've received a few times. Why is the Lakemont neighborhood broken so that part attends Cougar Ridge and part Sunset? Do you know the decision behind this years ago?
I think once again, our predecessors were faced with a numbers game. I mean, if you have that many students in Lakemont and the South Cove neighborhoods, right, you have to divide them in 2 somewhere. And so it's similar to the Grand Ridge conversation we're having now as a community and have had as a school district for a decade. Is, you know, when a certain area can, if you have 1,200 elementary students like we did at Grand Ridge for a time, when you have to draw the boundary somewhere. And I hate to say it like that, but that is basically what happened, is that community sees itself as one, but has been divided for school attendance for nearly 20 years. So I believe it was similar to now. As a new school opened, we had to fill it. And the only way to fill it was to draw new boundaries. And so that, you know, I don't believe there's a way and the second and new factor is that since we reboundaried Cougar Ridge to include the Atlas apartments, which are just over the hill on the Newcastle side by the Y, the large development there, because Newcastle is full. So we expanded Cougar Ridge by 6 classrooms, and then we enlarged Cougar Ridge's attendance area and added the Atlas apartments, which are generating quite a few kids. So that is one other reason why making that whole Lakemont area into one school, let's say we all sent to Cougar Ridge, isn't just numerically possible, even with the expansion. So if that makes sense.
Okay, next question. Were there other options you considered to address the community feedback before ultimately landing on the revised springboard? If so, is there a way to briefly summarize and why those options were discounted in favor of this one? It might help the committee in evaluating this proposal. Thank you.
Well, so is this from Michelle or Michael?
Yeah.
What I tried to do, since we knew we had a few weeks between meetings, is to first examine the themes we were seeing in correspondence. So if you've lived in this community for a while, you can tell when you touch a nerve because you're going to get correspondence rather rapidly back. And so, and a lot of my administrators and folks are shaking their heads, yes. So when the themes started to come in and we could see a simple solution that still kept the tenets of our charter, that is what we did. So Sunset is an example. Team looked back at it and said, well, okay, if the split's not desirable, then we can single feed them to IMS and we'll feed a different school, split feed a different school to PCMS. Same with E16. So I leaned back on the charter for the most part, and then the themes that were coming out of the correspondence. So again, Discovery, Audubon Park, as an example. The technical team found another way to fill elementary 17 instead of moving that adjacent community out of Discovery. So if you can give people what they want and it works numerically and transportation wise, and then why not try to find a solution that keeps communities intact? So that's what you saw come back on those revisions, was ideas for you all to answer community concerns. So there wasn't really those major themes were really what we focused on. I think Colleen and Bridget did a great job moving things around in the revised springboard, and it's kind of a new way to do it. Usually we don't. We would have you kind of struggle with this in real time, but so that's how we prioritize themes in the charter. Of course, always go back to the charter and how we evaluate something. So that's how the decisions were made.
Okay, next question. We live in Pinecrest, so wanting to know if we will be rezoned to elementary 16 from Clark Elementary. And I don't know if that's a Colleen or Bridget or someone on the tech team might be able to answer that one. Maybe a little bit better, not sure.
We're gonna have to, I have a decent grasp of numbers and addresses, but I can't pull that one out of my, I'll have to defer until we have time. Maybe Colleen, would you maybe have Bridget look to see? So we'll have the technical team pull.
Okay, I'm gonna reread that. I'm gonna reread that one more time for Colleen and Bridget, just because that question was sent just to me in the chat, not everybody else. We live in Pinecrest, so wanting to know if we will be rezoned to elementary 16 from Clark Elementary.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Okay, and we have a question and answer session also after our breakout, so we'll gives the tech team a little bit of time to research that and get back to folks before this meeting's over. Next question. Feedback on the revised Creekside boundaries is positive. Families like that the 212th corridor south of 24 stays together with the latest update. So not really a question.
I like positive affirmation. I'll take it.
Yes, they seem to be very happy. The people that were concerned about just taking a smaller chunk of Creekside out, and now it's a larger section, it kind of splits it a little more evenly so that they can be with friends that are across the street or in the same neighborhood.
Well, and I really appreciate that, because this is a big puzzle, and 40 of us are doing a puzzle together. And so I really appreciate your patience. And there's no perfect or right way to do the boundaries, I found. And usually community input and committee makes the boundaries better. I've never had it go a different way. So
absolutely.
I really appreciate that. And even the community input we got, that some of it was passionate, and there was a little bit of annoyance in some of it. It still was advocating for their neighborhood and community and their kids, which is what I expect parents and communities to do. And I think some of the changes, if we move forward, will alleviate a lot of that consternation. But again, there's no perfect boundaries, and there are always going to be trade-offs. But I think we are hopefully headed in the right direction. I haven't heard any other major themes of disappointment or worry, except for the ones I think that we've addressed tonight. There will be some bubble up later, I guarantee it. But for right now, I think we're in pretty decent shape.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for putting that address in the chat there. Colleen, you can get that address in the chat so we can work on that piece. Looks as of now, we are caught up on questions and whatnot. We'll have another opportunity to get back to questions and answers after our chats, after our breakout rooms. Sorry about that. But let's transition now to Mr. Cooper, really kicking off the conversations around elementary boundary introduction. After the tweaked proposal, springboard proposal, I know that he wants to go over some very important information before we send you off with a driving question into your breakout rooms. So CFO Cooper, if you'd like to kick us off with our elementary boundary conversations that we'll be having soon, and just giving folks some food for thought before we head into those.
You bet. I think if it were me and I was in the breakout room, there was a few things I would use. I would look, of course, at we tried to give you kind of that short email introduction for me about some of the salient changes. So hopefully those are where you start with some guiding questions. And then of course the beautiful yet awkward spreadsheet that shows the capacities. Of course, I would have that in hand as well. So this capacity sheet, along with the piece key, which is down below, because it comes on different tabs if it's in an Excel format. That and some of those salient questions and driving points that I provided to you earlier. I think that would be a good place to start your conversations.
Yeah, and Jake, do you want to go over that what the info that we sent out, just so they have that fresh, that we maybe verbalize that, given the input we've provided you with, the potential solutions to the majority of the concerns expressed, for these changes to be made, the committee has to adopt them. But those 5 pieces that we sent out that were with the tweaks to the springboard, did you want to maybe go over those verbally before we sent them off?
Yeah, hold on, Dr. Olmy. I'm just trying to load up some.
Perfect.
This would be called wait time if I was trying to find the. Come on. It will not let me share. Are you sharing? Oh, there it is. So if you go on online to your agenda, there are, I think, 4 embedded links for tonight's materials. There are the revised maps that were sent out. So this is the this is the Audubon Park Piece 54 switcheroo from Creekside to Discovery. That's a very technical term, the switcheroo, but that is what it is. So you have that in a pictorial fashion in a map. This is the Black Nugget PCMS piece that we talked about. This in here, piece 38, which we have made a revision to following some community input. This is all of Sunset single feeding to Issaquah Middle School. So that was that goes and accompanies the short summary that I sent you. So that there's a revision there. And then the last one is the elementary 16, which is the elementary 16 originally had a split to it, and now is a clean feeder, no split. And so those are 4 major things that I would like you to keep in mind. So the map is one. Of course, this brief memorandum here from me is a great place to start. And you can say, yeah, this guy's crazy. No way. Why would he do this? But at the same time, those are some really good questions to start, or ideas and suggestions that you would have to take action on. But I do believe from a technical standpoint, answer a lot of the community concerns we heard in the 200 plus pages of correspondence between the committee and the community. So is that sufficient framing, Dr. Olmy?
Yeah, one more piece though, and I know we were going to do this in this section. Can we share out a little bit more information on the rationale of the 80-20 Discovery split? I believe it is the 80% to Pine Lake and the 20% to Beaver Lake. Can you expand on that at all? I know we were going to come back to that in this section.
Right. And Colleen, I recall when we were looking at that, it was to balance the enrollments between Pine and Beaver Lake.
That's correct.
So historically, that area on the plateau, that Discovery and Sunny Hills area, they have been split schools, 1 or 2 of them each for as long as I can remember. Discovery for a long time didn't have its kindergartners present and was a 1st through 5th because it was overcrowded. Sunny Hills, if you have been around a while and you know that has been a swing area in the district just because of how dense the population is in the plateau right there. And I saw Director Weaver was watching the meeting, and I believe, she can talk about how many times she was reboundary nearly 20 years ago as a Sunny Hills parent. So those areas, since they're so densely populated, the one way we right size the enrollment between Pine and Beaver Lake in this case is, this is Pine and Beaver, and then Pine Lake and PCMS both. So the Discovery splits 80-20. The trade-off, of course, if you didn't do the split, you would have maybe not as well balanced enrollment at your plateau middle schools, which is something we could consider. But Colleen, I believe our main driver was to right size the middle schools and make them as close to the same size as possible.
Correct.
Am I missing anything in our logic?
No.
Okay.
See a hand in the air, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry. So I just have a lot of Discovery parents who are pretty upset about the split because Discovery had historically been 100% to Pine Lake. So in the original revision, you were 90-10, and now we're 80-20. So I don't know if it would help our families feel better to see what that 20% is. Like, I think they need to visualize it, and that's what we're missing is the map. Because if we're being asked to vote on this, I don't know how I can vote without actually seeing what that 20% of Discovery is going to Beaver Lake, since a lot of our constituents, I don't even know if that's the right word, but are very unhappy, and your inbox is probably going to get flooded pretty darn quick tonight. So if there's a map that exists, otherwise I think we have to table at least part C of number 5 until we have a map.
Yeah, and just Jake, as you're responding to the map piece, I would say just from a historical perspective, Discovery has not had a split for 10 years as of 2010. Before that was a split elementary school. The reason I know that is I used to be the principal of Beaver Lake Middle School, and we got part of Discovery, and Pine Lake got the other part. But yeah, for the last 10 years, that's been a direct feeder into Pine Lake. So Jake, you want to jump in on the map question?
Yeah, I was looking for our revised, Colleen, we should be able to see which piece on the spreadsheet. I was just trying to.
Jake, I just emailed you a map.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll share my screen now. Sorry, just wanted to make sure it wasn't some email from my wife I was opening. I'm just kidding. No humor today. Share screen. Okay. So Lisa Reader, can you see that? And then I can have my assistant email it over to the committee as well.
Yeah, if you guys just want to send an email, or when it gets posted online, that's fine too. I absolutely can see this. So it looks like before what you guys have been taking was 50, but now it looks like 49A is getting added as well.
Correct.
Yeah, so 49A got added.
And that is because Pine Lake has been rapidly growing and have new housing stock around it, and is one of our largest middle schools now. And Beaver Lake, which used to be one of our largest middle schools, is now our smallest middle school. And so one main reason that we are proposing a split feed, of course, is to right size those two schools. So,
well, sorry to interrupt. In the original map that we got last time on December 2nd, 49A and 50 were going to Beaver Lake Middle School. So I don't know if the splits were just calculated wrong or how we're going to 20%.
We had to recalculate. That is correct. I recalculated the split. I wanted to pull those numbers because Colleen and I were talking. I go, that looks a little light.
Got it.
And so we recalced, as I said in my message, that I had to recalc some of the splits. So it's an 80-20 split.
Okay, so it's still pulling the same exact locations. The numbers just Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You bet.
And Jake, before we jump into groups, looks like we've got one more here. Currently, Black Nugget is a Clark IMS school, I believe. With the new middle school switch to PCMS, which elementary will they attend? Never mind, E16. Thanks, Dana. Never mind. See, I like to read chats in real time, so I discover things when everybody else does. Thank you, Dana Rundle. Okay, any other questions in the chat? I don't think so.
Really, Dana? 2 questions?
And you're on
I just
mute.
have one really quick. Sorry, I was getting to it.
Okay.
It's a really small technical question. I don't know if now or later. Piece number 65 is part of, now it's going to E17. There are only 2 middle school students in that block, but they are zoned to PCMS, where the rest of E17 is going to Pine Lake. Is that a possible
That
switch?
could be some technical cleanup. Because what we do, believe it or not, is we have a GIS map of the district, and if you are not super duper steady-handed and precise when you're redrawing boundaries on your GIS map, you can have exactly what happened. So, Colleen,
Just pointing it out.
would you look at the 2 lone middle school kiddos that we have apparently isolated, some strange middle school? So yeah, we'll look at that, because and that's a good catch. There will be those, just so you know, even when we get to the end of this process, we'll realize that we missed a house that wasn't built yet, or a street that didn't exist. Those things do happen with school boundaries. And then we would make them what's called an administrative adjustment. So Dana, if we caught that later and those parents called and were like, why the heck am I going here? We would make an administrative adjustment to the boundaries to make sure that we don't do those stupid things like that and leave 2 kiddos out in the middle of nowhere.
Lisa.
Sorry, I promise this might be the last. Can you have transportation just confirm if piece 49A and 50 would get bus routes to Beaver Lake Middle School? When they were at Pine Lake, they would have, because it's further, but we just need to confirm if buses will be available to those 2 pieces when they go to Beaver Lake.
Colleen, can you confirm off the cuff, or are you going to hold your answer?
Yes, they would have bus routes.
Okay.
Okay. Looks like we are caught up on the chat. Looks like we are caught up on the hand raise. DJ Stephen Collins, are you with us?
Yep, rooms are open.
Okay. People are leaving.
You sent them all. That was quick.
You could also message them since they're in there quickly.
Okay, can you message them for me, Stephen?
I sure can.
Okay, just put this, review new Springboard and discuss any issues that come up in your groups.
Okay.
Okay, and also Stephen, looking at the clock right now, I would like to give those groups about 23 minutes. That would have them coming back at 7:15. Can you set that as well?
7:15. 7:15 and review all new Springboard what?
And discuss any issues that come up in your groups.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So technical team, anybody watching on our YouTube channel, we will be back here at 7:15 when the groups come back, and we will take any and all questions, and we'll see the kind of feedback that we get from those groups. So,
and Stephen, we are no longer, we are not streaming our current technical team, right?
You are, hold please.
We are?
You are for another second. Hang on.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so Stephen, they got the directive.